Joining forces, that is what they call it, when these lettered agencies unite together behind the scenes or a cause. According to this article by Science Magazine, the NIH joined forces with, quote, "Active is partly modeled on a long-established FNIH organized program called the Accelerating Medicines Partnership, in which companies join forces with NIH to generate shared data. Although focused on the United States, NIH says Active is also working with the European Medicines Agency," close quote. So why are all these forces interested in generating shared data? Well, they go on to say, quote, "NIH is assembling working groups of scientists who will inventory drugs and vaccines at different stages of development and then decide which are most promising for future testing and not already in well-designed studies," close quote. So they are pushing the vaccines, and they will decide for all of us which drugs are better suited to fulfill their New World Order agenda, right? They continue on, quote, "NIH and its partners say they have put off, for now, deciding how to answer potentially thorny questions about intellectual property ownership and the pricing of any new treatments developed under the partnership," close quote. The key takeaway words here are "for now" and "intellectual property," meaning at some point they will probably decide what lie they want to tell us about which forces actually owns the patent on any new drugs stemming from their research, and they will probably also continue to be dishonest about the money they are making off of people being infected. Quote, "The NIH project joins numerous other COVID-19 research coordination efforts around the world," close quote. However, the partnership doesn't include the WHO or World Health Organization yet. Quote, WHO chief scientist said her agency welcomes the NIH effort. But for vaccines, she contends that WHO is well positioned to coordinate the field with an expert group that is now being formed. Quote, "The best and most efficient way would be to consider one large global study which would look at different vaccine candidates," close quote. Quote, "It too has been coordinating COVID-19 research, organizing a global trial of several drugs called Solidarity," close quote. And anyone familiar with the 1960s and the liberal era of protest knows that the word is associated with liberalism or globalism and the people behind the New World Order or the one world government ideology. But I digress. The article goes on to say that the NIH and the WHO are doing their own research with their own partnerships, but that it's important that we have, quote, "NIH and WHO coordination," close quote. Quote, "Richard Danzig, former Secretary of the U.S. Navy who is heavily involved in international vaccine planning, says that although, quote, the NIH effort is commendable, it doesn't directly take on another challenge once a vaccine has been developed: how to make enough to vaccinate the world's population. We need also, Danzig says, to prepare global manufacturing for vaccine production," close quote. looks like I will need to research Mr. Danzig. Anyway, so what is ACTIV? Besides being one of the entities that NIH has joined forces with. According to the NIH website, quote, the National Institutes of Health and the Foundation for the NIH are bringing together more than a dozen leading biopharmaceutical companies, the Health and Human Services Office of the Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, and the European Medicines Agency to develop an international strategy for a coordinated research response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The planned Accelerating COVID-19 Therapeutic Interventions and Vaccines Partnership, or ACTIV, will develop a collaborative framework for prioritizing vaccine and drug candidates, streamlining clinical trials, coordinating regulatory processes, and or leveraging assets among all partners to rapidly respond to the COVID-19 and future pandemics. This is part of the whole of government, whole of America response the administration has led to beat COVID-19, close quote. So basically, ACTIV, or this partnership with NIH, will decide who will receive vaccines and will also leverage assets among partners to rapidly respond to COVID-19. What does that even mean? Why do we need a separate lettered entity to decide those two things? To garner more tax dollars unnoticed by the average taxpayer? So it appears. And if all of that isn't worrisome enough, it goes on to say, quote, the partnership is being developed with input from a steering committee managed by the FNIH, which includes leaders from NIH, FDA, and the research and development organizations of the companies, close quote. I've mentioned this before, but why is there a steering committee to steer this whole pandemic? And surprise, surprise, it includes leadership from the FNIH, NIH, FDA, and other private companies, which leads to the question, who stands to gain from this pandemic? Those who stand to gain something, financially or otherwise, are usually the ones behind the scenes, steering the outcome to their favor.